Hi, everyone. I am just going to be our pre-show for a minute or a minute and a half while people start trickling in. I'm going to wait until we get to a good number of attendees. So I'm pleased to see people coming in the window. Thank you all for joining us so much. So I want to welcome you. My name is Julia Halprin. I am the executive editor of Artnet News, and I wanted to welcome you to the first of 3 Artnet talks that are in collaboration with Art Market Mentors. We're aiming to offer career advice for the art world at a time when a lot of people are facing new challenges and old challenges that have resurfaced at a very new moment. Each one will have a different moderator, subject, and slate of panelists. And so as you all come in, I am going to shortly turn it over to Cat Manson, who is the co-founder of Art Market Monitors and the former global head of communications and corporate affairs at Christie's, who will be moderating today. If you have questions over the course of the discussion, we are going to save some time at the end to answer them. So please put them in the Q&A field that you'll see at the bottom right of your Zoom screen. And if you see another question that you like in there, you can press the thumbs up to vote it, and we'll be able to see it more easily. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Kat.
Julia, thank you so much and welcome everybody. And again, thank you to Julia and Artnet team for sharing their platform with us. For 25 years, my art world career took me from the tiniest village in England all around the world. I met some amazing people, helped sell paintings, advised on complex high court cases, opened offices in new regions, closed them again when there was a market downturn. And I've had some amazing experiences, and I'm incredibly grateful for those experiences. But like everyone here, there have been some incredibly tough moments. And last year was a pinnacle of pressure and change. And I always try to seek solace in humor and joy. So forgive me if I go into fits of giggles at any point in the next hour. But as we sit in lockdown London with no end in sight, my thoughts are just with everyone who has and still is going through some serious challenges. So becoming a better community and supporting each other through these challenging times is the founding principle behind the Art Market Mentor project. My co-founder Caroline and I have run internal networking groups for many years, and we wanted to replicate that experience for a wider audience. And Sandhya, I worked with you on the networking group in the past. So the people we've worked with over the years have been a lifeline to us for new avenues, new adventures and support. And many of those people are now mentors on the program, including everyone on the panel today. And I'd like to thank you all for volunteering your time. And for those that we haven't tapped yet, watch this space. So the fragmented art world doesn't have many places for information and support. And as we transition in our careers, we wanted to share our network and draw the community together and solve some of these challenges we hope together. So our 3 Art Market mentors joining me today are here to share some stories and some ideas and tips on how to navigate challenge and change in your career. I'll briefly introduce you to them, but get your questions lined up in the chat box because we want to spend a good chunk of our time working with you and answering your questions. Victoria Siddall is board director of Frieze and chair of the board of trustees of Studio Voltaire. She's a pioneer and stays true to her style and values and has recently been a key part of the gallery's Climate Coalition initiative. Shlomi is the founder of Greenhouse Auctions, hi Shlomi, a sustainable, ethical new auction platform that's providing a different business model for the primary market. He's a 20-year veteran of the auction world and recently was head of photographs at one of the leading auction houses. Sandhya Jain-Patel is co-founder and culture producer at SRC Partners, a new consultancy firm who provide insight and guidance on diversity, inclusivity, and authenticity to help organizations develop their content. Previously in her career, she was a leading specialist in Indian, Himalayan, and Southeast Asian art. And her goal is to make sure everyone feels represented and their voices are heard, and she can help your company do that. And finally, Nigel Manson is a career strategy advisor at Stork May, a partnership that specializes in coaching, advising, and mentoring senior executives at critical points in their career. They work with CEO, CFO, and board level appointments, and while not specifically focused on the art world, their advice is recognized as world leading. Nigel's been in professional services all his career, most of it at McKinsey, where he was a partner, but he was also worked in financial services within investment banking, venture capital, and most recently as a fund manager and investment analyst. He is a committed Donald Judd fan, so we'll let him come into the art world on this occasion. Today, we'll touch on how roles in the art world have changed and continue to change in this new reality. We're going to explore some of the longer term social impact of working from home and touch on how to perhaps approach redundancy and furlough. So it's a new year, but as we've already seen on many fronts, we're facing many of the same challenges and new ones. So Victoria, we're going to start with you. Last year, a huge year. What did it teach you and your organization?
Thank you so much for having me, Kat and Julia, and thank you everyone for joining. Lessons from 2020, where to start? I would say to expect the unexpected, most of all, and the sort of idea of risk management in our businesses, but also in our personal lives. I'm generally very optimistic as a person, and I don't spend a lot of time dwelling on bad things that might happen. However, it's clear from the last year that it's always good to have in the back of your mind that everything could be turned upside down at any moment, and to know that you're able to deal with that mentally as well as financially, and like whatever your line of work is, that you have this kind of ability to sort of change and learn and embrace the new and the unexpected. And with that comes the need for flexibility, for creativity, for innovation. And I feel that the people who have embraced that in the last year have probably been a step ahead of the game. It's not an easy thing to do. And especially at my age and the kind of company I work for, where at Frieze we do fairs, we do them really well, we turn them out every year in London, in New York, in LA. And last year, obviously, that was completely pulled from under our feet. And we took all of our fairs online for the first time and at very short notice, successfully in the end. But that took an enormous kind of shift of all the people that we work with internally and externally to just conceptualize what we do completely differently. And then even for this coming year, Frieze New York, which happens the first week in May, would normally be 200 galleries in a temporary structure on Randall's Island. It's now going to be 60 galleries at the Shed, and it's much smaller space and a great institution in Manhattan. So just not being kind of, completely wedded to the way things are done before, and sort of open to new approaches, I feel has been, a huge lesson and so vital to getting through this. And it also, of course, applies to home life as well, to relationships, to friendships, to staying in touch with family, to the way you keep your children entertained and educated, as we were discussing earlier, the joys of homeschool. Something else I think has been so vital and that has been an important lesson is like the importance of a kind of personal touch in whatever way you can manage it. And, for me over the last year, that's been phone calls. I've never spent so much time on the phone or on Zoom calls, but just being able to talk to people, to listen to people, to get, to generate ideas together, but also understand their concerns. Like that's helped enormously in terms of just sort of shaping ideas and, and innovations for the future. And then, of course, the last year also wasn't like COVID was the only thing that happened. And another vital lesson for all of us, I think, but certainly for me personally and for Frieze as an organization, was that while we may think and have always thought that we embrace diversity and inclusivity, we've still got a lot of listening and a lot of learning to do.
Vicky, thank you. I think you've touched on some of the most really core themes of last year, and hopefully in a way finding a platform for some really positive things to address this year. I mean, while we're still on the challenges, Nigel, can I turn to you and just talk a little bit about redundancy? And you know, a lot of people have lost their jobs in the art world, and that's a lot to process. And I know you work with plenty of people who are either moving by choice in their career, but also plenty of people who have lost their jobs. And that's been a really, really difficult time, emotionally, financially, by all measures. What sort of advice do you give people, and what are the universal takeaways that people watching who perhaps have lost their roles can learn from your and your colleagues' advice?
Well, first off, thank you very much for having me. It's a privilege to be here, and look forward to the chat. In the jobs market, I sometimes liken myself a little bit to a wedding planner, because for most people, they get married once, maybe twice in their career, and they only have to think about marquees and caterers and church services and flowers for that perspective. But for me, as a wedding planner, this is my day job. So changing career is my day job. It's what I advise people on 6 days a week, 365 days a year. And so this is the first thing to realize, is this is perfectly normal. I think a key word here is perspective, which I think is great for the art market world, because you love the word perspective. It's a word that you sort of speak with ponderous gravitas and say, perspective. And I'm a sucker for a Caravaggio painting, you know, dramatically lit in light and shade, you know, a sort of snapshot at the you know, at the moment of intrigue or mischief. And that may be what people are feeling like at the moment. It's all a bit stressful and it's all a bit dramatic. But I think there are other senses of perspective that may actually help people. And that's what I spend my time talking to my clients about. And let me just mention 3 of them. The first is that changing jobs is a perfectly normal part of the business cycle. And that's what this is. It's nothing personal. It's just business. Everybody leaves their job eventually. Even if you stay at your desk until you die, you will be carried out and leave that job eventually. And so the first thing you realize is that this is totally normal, and it's just part of the business cycle. Sometimes you'll choose the timing of your leaving, and sometimes others will choose that time for you, but it's perfectly normal. The second thing I'd say is take a really big step back and look in the broader perspective. I was fascinated by what Victoria was saying, because my learning from last year is we need to just put things in a broader perspective. We are in the middle of a 100-year event. There has been nothing like this that has hit our society for 100 years. As a client said to me last week, thank God it isn't a once in 90-year event, because we couldn't have dealt with this 10 years ago, because we wouldn't have had the technology. But I've had clients say to me, it feels, I'm never going to get a job. There are no opportunities out there. And I go, but do you think companies are never going to hire people again? Do you think everyone's going to stick with who they have? And the answer is clearly not. We are in an economic downturn. It's a pretty scary one, and it's a pretty big one, but it's a downturn, and this will pass. If you go back to 1919 and after the World War I and after the Spanish flu, the world economy was on its knees. But the decade that followed that was called the Roaring Twenties, and it was an extraordinary decade of unparalleled growth and expansion and opportunity and innovation. And like Victoria, I'm an optimist. You prepare for the worst, but hope for the best. And I think we are heading for a decade of extraordinary opportunity for all of us, as it was 100 years ago. And the third thing I'd say about perspective is think about your personal perspective. Things might feel very uncertain, and that things are being done to you, and you're in the middle of a crisis. But what I would say is flip that round. And rather than have things be done to you, think about what you can do about it. I'm going to sound like a new age hippie guru, but think of this as an opportunity. All of the uncertainty about your future has gone away because you're not in that job. You're not thinking, is now a time to move? Is this the best job for me? You know that actually you have no choice right now. You actually have to get out there and think about what you want to do. And the only person who is ever going to really care 100% about your career is you. So that is my final bit about perspective. In addition to advising others on changing careers. I have unexpectedly changed careers more times in my life than I'd like. And I remember after I got fired from my last job, sitting on a wet beach in Cornwall, trying to keep the drizzle off my crossword whilst I watch my kids try to kill each other in the surf. And I just sat there thinking about what I wanted to do with my life. And I worked out that I had been driven by how other people define success. And actually, I'd never really thought about what defines success for me. And I would never have thought that here I am on just about the right side of 50, doing a job I love, working with people I enjoy working with, learning every day, being very fulfilled in my role and feeling very, very lucky. And that would never have happened had I not been fired. So every cloud really does have a silver lining. Now, my wife would point out that the 60% pay cut isn't exactly ideal, but as I come back to her, I learned that money isn't everything, and I am motivated by other things in my career. So that's what I would say. It's shift your perspective and make it work for you.
Thank you, Nigel. She sounds a real trial, your wife. Moving to Shlomi, because I think a lot of what Nigel just said, Shlomi, I'm thinking about your story and how things have changed for you. And I think, you know, on the next question I was going to ask was about the most challenging moment in your career. But tell us, again, drawing a little bit on what Nigel has said, tell us a little bit about what's happened to you and the incredible business that has resulted from your journey.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, a pleasure and an honor being on this panel with such incredibly talented individuals. Kat and Caroline, of course, thank you very much for setting this up. It's a pleasure. And this is the perfect panel for me to be on right now because I've actually experienced losing my job twice, right? I was made redundant in 2009 during the Great Recession, which was terrifying. My boss just called me on a Friday afternoon and said, I'm sorry, we're going to have to make cuts. It's nothing personal. You know, we began to laugh and cry. It was like Phantom of the Opera all over again. But I remember being very terrified. I didn't have my green card yet. I was very confused. But eventually that's how I ended up in New York, because I didn't have a choice, to Nigel's point. I didn't have the privilege of looking for a job. I was just looking at opportunities, and there was an amazing opportunity in New York. I was living in Chicago at the time. And that catapulted my career to a whole other level. And it prepared me for the biggest challenge of my career, which was this past year. So I had been, I'd been with an auction house for a number of years. And then in November of 2019, I moved to a competitor. And because it was a competitor, I had 6 months of non-compete, pretty standard. And of course, during that period, the world began to crumble. And as you know, things turned out, the position ended up getting rescinded the day before I was scheduled to start. So it was nothing personal. I knew that. It was still a shock. And I paused. I decided to just stop and pause and introspect and reach for the wine cabinet because I needed that. And my new best friend. And yeah, I'm sure I'm in good company right now. But, you know, I realized, you know what, I'll be fine. I've been in this industry for 20 years. I have connections, I have clients, I have, you know, a couple of bucks in the bank. I'll be fine. But I remember thinking, if I'm in this position, there are so many others who are hurting right now. I could have gone the path of being a private advisor, which a lot of my former colleagues have done, and that's great, but I knew that I wanted to help. I knew that I wanted to build something and empower as many people within the art world. And the people who are hurting the most were artists and small to mid-sized galleries. So I was supposed to start at the new employer on May 18th. By the end of May 19th, the next day, I had filed my LLC, bought the domain name, received my tax code, and filed my certificate of publication with the state of New York. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to build something. And the fact that, you know, the virus was so disruptive to our economy, and we saw so many, you know, it shook everything to its core, and we saw so many cracks forming in the foundations of every single industry, including the art world. I looked at those cracks as openings, as new opportunities to offer alternate models. And I love the auction industry, but there are also things about the auction industry that have always bugged me. And I love the primary market. And I said, now is the time, because everything is in flux and everything is crazy and the world is upside down, to try something new. So why not take some of the elements that I love structurally from the auction industry with some of the values that I really respect in the primary market and create a new platform? Just present something new that will be for the benefit of the primary market. Why not give them an additional tool in addition to the tools that they already have in their toolbox? And honestly, I didn't know how much I didn't know about starting a business. I'd never started a business before. There's so many moving parts to it. It was very overwhelming. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There were incredibly difficult moments. There are times that I could not get out of bed. There are times that I broke down in my kitchen and cried because everything just seemed to be so overwhelming. And it's okay. Admitting to yourself that you're hurting, that you're vulnerable, is the first step to really rebuilding yourself and finding that source of resilience and doing something for yourself, and if you can, for others.
Shlomi, thank you so much. And the platform looks great. And I know the first sale was, you know, a storming success, and we're so excited to see where it goes next. And the model where, you know, you've built into the model a contribution back into society, which I just think is a really relevant and interesting and an appealing thing. So very, very excited to see where it goes. And again, my lovely friend Sandhya, I mean, I'm coming to you now, and Vicky and Nigel and Shlomi have talked about how you approach change, you know, and some of the opportunities there. And again, you've had an incredible year, and set up this and thank you for joining us today, because I know you're going straight off to run a conference straight after this. But can you talk a little bit from your perspective about approaching and managing change, and tell us a little bit more about SRC?
Oh gosh, thank you so much. You, Kat, Carolyn, everyone at Art Market Mentors, also at Artnet, for having me. I'm excited to be here, and a lot of what I'm about to say, some of that can be found in the Artnet career stories that they published so nicely last week, was it? Who knows what day it is anymore. SRC Partners is Sandhya, which is my name, Ruhi, which is my partner's name, Culture Partners. And so what we do is we provide the expertise in diversity, equity, equality, and inclusion to help storytellers reach a wider audience. It's very simple economics. If you reach a wider audience and they love what they hear, they're going to come to you for more content. And so you get to tap those pocketbooks more and more. And I think, especially with the events of last year, the murders of George Floyd and others last summer, and the whole Black Lives Matter movement, we know that these stories have to be told with authenticity and nuance. Lip service is just not going to cut it anymore. And so our partnership, our firm is there to do the research, because I do research. I have for many years. And that's how we provide the authenticity for storytellers to make these characters 360. So whether it is a movie, a TV show, an art exhibition, you know, Frieze coming up. I'm so excited. It's going to be at the Shed. I was at the Shed last year before I was made redundant. So there's so much that is out there that can have that DEI lens put on top of it, and it needs to be there. So when it comes to sort of approaching and managing change, as I said, I was let go from the Shed in August, which was not a surprise at all. The minute we went into lockdown, I think on March 16th or whatever it was, I literally cleaned out my drawer and took it with me because I knew I was not coming back. And for those of you that don't know, I do have a master's in microbiology and molecular genetics. So when I hear about a worldwide virus, I'm like, yeah, it's time to go into lockdown. And so what happened was I realized, you know, between having been at Christie's before, which I loved so much, being at the Shed, which was also very insightful because it was the first arts organization that I was in that was actually diverse, you know, where I wasn't the only person of color in the room, which was exciting and sort of shocking to me. And I realized that I wanted to broaden that experience, not just for myself, but for others across all arts. So that's why I started to think about, you know, what is it that I really can do with all these experiences that I've had and the knowledge that I had. 3 tips that I have for people that are looking to manage their change. Number 1, you have to expand your relationships. So as Victoria said, you have to reach out to people, not just on LinkedIn and social media. Yes, make those connections, find the people that you want to talk to, but then make that personal connection, asking, maybe you read an article or you heard something that is relevant to what they posted. Comment on that, ask them for a 15-minute coffee meeting to hear about their journey. Everyone loves to talk about themselves. That's why we're all here. So ask people what their journey was. If it's something that is parallel to your interest, make sure you do a little homework and make sure you can offer something to them, even if it's just connecting them to somebody else you know that can further their goals. So expanding your network is critical. And it's not just networking, but it's authenticity again behind those relationships that you're cultivating. I realized after being at Christie's that my network was completely stale. And so I joined a women's network called Chief, which some of you may have heard of. Their goal is to empower women into the echelons, the top echelons of decision-making, and to keep them there. And the women that I found at Chief, talking to them about what I wanted to do, again, not being in the art world, but like Nigel, having parallel experiences just broadened my perspective on what I could bring to the table. So that was really crucial to know that my value was not just in the art world, but more broadly applicable. The second thing I would recommend is do something for yourself. Like you're doing that outward work with creating more relationships, do the inward work to learn more about what you want to do. So, you know, Shlomi, he had to start a new auction house, so start a new business. I am sure he's doing a lot of work researching and finding out what has to be done, how to, you know, pay taxes, how to make sure you're, you know, doing the PR, the marketing, everything right. You wear many hats when you're starting your own business, as we all know. So do the inward work to learn about whatever it is you want to do. And if you decide you don't want to do that anymore, great. At least you spent the time researching that particular idea and deciding it was not for you. And then the third thing I would recommend, and this is so crucial, rest. You must take rest. You know, if Shlomi can't get out of bed, don't get out of bed. Take the day off, right? Or even if it's just 5 minutes to sit down and make a cup of tea for yourself and have some of those delicious biscuits that they have in England, which now I'm dying for, you know, whatever you need, take rest, turn off what it is you need to do. Don't keep saying, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. Don't should on yourself. Take rest. Those are my 3 tips for managing change.
Thank you. Thank you. And in fact, I think picking up on that last point of rest, I want to skip ahead a question to talk about, you know, how, and ask all of you panelists a little bit about the working from home environment and whether you have kids or not. You know, what insight do you have in terms of, you know, building resilience? And I think another big conversation of last year and certainly going to this year is around mental health. And both for ourselves and our colleagues and our friends and our children and our relatives. And I think it'll be interesting to see how professional organizations truly start to embrace that kind of support on that, the pastoral side, as well as the kind of more traditional learning and development paths that are often in place. So, you know, Shlomi, you talked a little bit about some very tough days. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you do to keep yourself feeling positive and motivated and healthy? And I promise not to be skeptical about yoga.
Well, there goes my answer. But the thing is that yes, life is overwhelming, everything, we're all in the same boat, right? There's no reason to have FOMO. We're all on the same boat. We're all going through this together. So don't feel like you're the only one who's hurting. Don't feel like you're the only one suffering. Don't feel like you are the odd man out. We're all in this together. So it was a very challenging year. And finding resilience has got 2 parts to it. One is, you know, the state of mind of I will do this, but it really doesn't carry a whole lot of water if you don't translate it into action of I can do this. And sometimes when you're overwhelmed by in our specific panel, you know, the idea of a job search or moving careers or changing careers, it's okay to put that on the back burner and look at other aspects of your life from which you can derive a great sense of satisfaction and accomplishment and motivation, and foster those. They will compensate for perhaps a thinner stream that you have going on one side. If you're running on other channels, right? If you are firing up your exercise, which is possible. I went back to the gym after many months of being immobile. I just, packed up my chins, my rolls, and I forced myself to go to the gym. Very humbling experience, very humbling. But it was certainly not easy, but I found that it's very gratifying. And then once I got a little bit of traction there, I decided to pick up cooking because I'm an atrocious cook. I burn everything. I poisoned my partner a few times. He lived. And I was like, you know what, let me take on this challenge and see if I can do this. And I found myself feeling empowered by these small little, low-hanging fruit challenges around me that helped me get motivated about other aspects of my life, which in turn funneled great sense of motivation and resilience and positivity. So I felt more inclined to take on smaller projects in my work. And as all my fellow panelists know, there are very difficult days during which no one is answering to your emails, no one is returning your calls. The weight of silence is crushing, and you're like, is this the beginning of the end? That's the perfect time, to Sandhya's point, to stop, pause, make yourself a cup of tea, go for a walk, play with your dog. Sometimes in the middle of the day, I pause everything and I go watch Schitt's Creek for the 10th time, because that has medicinal purposes. I think that we have a scientist in the room, I'm sure she can attest to it. Like, that show just does something for my brain that I can't describe. Whatever that show is for you, indulge, be good to yourself. There's a great song by Madison Cunningham that came out in 2020. It's called The Age of Agony, about the age we're living in, but it's all these wonderful life lessons. And the best line in that song, which is the line that I've been living by, is be friends with what you are. So be good to yourself and embrace yourself.
Oh, Shlomi, well, I feel like I should go into Moira right now to sort of pay homage to, I finally moved on from Buffy the Vampire Slayer to Moira, shows how my state of mind. But I think that idea of sort of what I call micro holidays, and when we're completely locked down in London, so suddenly the small things in life that give you enormous pleasure, whether it's your hot bath or whatever it might be, take on a new importance, and one's grateful for that. Vicky, I'm turning to you because, again, I'd love to know, you lead a team, and the Frieze team's been through a lot last year. How do you yourself keep yourself positive and motivated, and what have you seen on the team, and how have you kept the team motivated?
I mean, look, there's nothing tougher than having to tell people who've worked unbelievably hard for months on something. And bear in mind, with an art fair, you work on it for 12 months and then it lasts for 5 days, and so much goes into that. And the team at Frieze is just phenomenal, and so kind of brilliant and conscientious and motivated. And so, yeah, having to cancel, I mean, Frieze New York was the first fair we had to cancel last year. In around March, the fair was due to take place in May, and we realized it was just going to be impossible. Incredibly hard to deliver that news, especially over, a kind of a Zoom call or a Teams call. And I have to say, I think what kind of kept everyone motivated and going was this feeling like, okay, we are taking this online. We're not giving up here. We're doing it. We're just doing it in a completely different way. It's probably going to be more work than doing fairs the way, doing the fair is probably going to be, harder online in this new platform, and talking to every gallery and talking through how it's going to work. And, it was a lot, but everyone kind of just, I think, stepped up to an extraordinary degree to make that happen, which was incredible to see. So I think having, it's really important to be able to, for everybody to sort of get their teeth into projects rather than just step back and give up. Even if, sometimes it won't be as satisfying and gratifying, but right now, I think, to Shlomi's point, we cannot beat ourselves up about anything. We're the whole world is in this situation. This is not one person or one company or one group of people. It's just, it's everything. In terms of more personally, Kat, you mentioned working at home with children. I mean, homeschool is obviously a constant source of comedy for everyone involved. And obviously shout out to anybody who's listening to who's also attempting to school a child while doing a full-time job. Kind of ridiculous and hilarious concept. But like on a serious note, the closure of schools creates an enormous amount of anxiety and concern for not just your own child, but a whole generation of children, you know. So there really are things here that I know for everybody who's, you know, putting on a brave face and, you know, turning up to work every day, smiling into a laptop, who in the background is probably having an incredibly hard time. You know, that's everybody right now. And it's important to remember that. It really is. I started a new role on the 1st of January at Frieze. It's been a long time since I changed roles. I realize it's not changing companies, but still a big deal for me after 17 years at Frieze. And I had so many plans for January, starting in my new role. Of course, I can't do any of the things I planned to do, which was, you know, going out, talking to people, having lunch with them, getting new things off the ground. But again, you cannot beat yourself up for things that you cannot control. You just got to, you know, think about what is possible right now. And it may seem counterintuitive, but this also might be the best moment in our lives to start something new. I mean, look at what Shlomi is doing and what Sandhya is doing. I mean, these are new, amazing organizations that respond so much to the world as it is now in the current moment, and that have come out of this period. It's really inspiring to hear about those. And Kat, you mentioned the Gallery Climate Coalition at the beginning, which is something I've been involved with over the last 12 months, and which we launched in October last year, and have had a phenomenal response to from galleries all over the world who want to be part of a better future, and, you know, want to, like, you know, practical solutions to kind of cut their emissions and their impacts on the planet. And this is such a good moment for that, because everyone has stepped off the hamster wheel. Everything's ground to a halt. So now it's up to us, as things start to open up, like how, you know, what part do we want to play in that, and what kind of world do we want to kind of rebuild? And being part of something philanthropic, I think, this is a very long-winded way of saying it, is also really good for your mental health right now, as well as for the world at large. And I found that I'm the chair of the board of Studio Voltaire, non-profit gallery space in South London, one of the founders of GCC, and those two philanthropic ventures have taken a lot of my time recently, but have also given me an enormous sense of purpose and, you know, an optimism.
Vicky, thank you. I mean, I would just second that, and saying that the Art Market Mentors project, which you know, it has been an amazing thing to get me moving in December and January. You know, I had been at Christie's for 25 years, and you know, to change from that was an enormous, and also the change from the pace of the role. I think that's the other real challenge, is you're used to working, you know, in one environment, and suddenly having all that energy. It's been amazing to be able to put it into something else, and that thanks to everybody else. But I think it's an amazing, as you said, it's an incredible moment for change, because everything's so disrupted anyway, and even the most risk-averse people, the most, and I think we'll talk about it at the end, but our next panel is going to be on sort of, you know, digital development. You know, every role, every organization has had to change over the last year, and so it's an amazing moment. We've got some questions coming in, and I'm just conscious of time, so I want to get to them. But I think the final question I wanted to talk to is, again, thinking about change. And Nigel, I'm going to come back to you, and just drawing on what some of the others have said. You know, you structure, you help your clients structure change. So is there anything that, again, our audience today and us could take out of, you know, some of those, you know, actual tips on what you do? You have the idea, or you have no idea, but what advice would you give your clients about stepping into change?
It's inevitable, and you can't avoid it, and everyone hates it, which is extraordinary, because as a species, we are unbelievably adaptable. And so for me, it comes back to what I said right at the beginning, which is you have to shift the perspective. And if everybody hates it, be different, embrace it, lean into it. And that's what I say to all my clients is, you have a fantastic opportunity. You have, you know, you're not out of work. None of you are out of work. You are just in between roles, because your current job is working out what you want to do with the rest of your life and what your next opportunity is. Props to Sandhya and Shlomi, because if you can make it work in this environment, your businesses are going to fly. And that is a very brave step, but in hindsight, it's obvious because it's working for you, and that's fantastic. And so what I say to my clients is the way to own this is to feel like it's not being done to you, but to try and wrestle back some kind of control. Your next opportunity is out there, in the future. I'm going to misquote Shakespeare, which is going to annoy the literature students on the call, but Shakespeare talked of death, but it could have just have been about the future when he said, "It's the undiscovered country from which no man returns." Your next role is out there and it's coming towards you. You can't see it yet and you don't know what it is. So to actually prepare for it, you've got to do two things. You've got to work out a plan. You have to know what the characteristics of the next role will be for you, where it's going to take you, what success looks like for you. Because there's nothing worse than something comes along and you think, I'll do that because there's nothing else out there, and you leap into it. But then your perfect job comes up 2 months later, or even worse, your next opportunity comes and you just don't realize that that's going to work for you because it's not quite as much status, or the pay packet doesn't look as good, or I'm going to have to move somewhere else. Have a think about what really matters for you, and have a think about where you want to go in the next 10, 15, 20 years, and aim high, because it's your life and you've only got one of them. You can always dial back your aspirations after a period of time and sort of start to compromise and settle. But for the start, aim big, because once you've got that plan, all these things that come at you, you're no longer reactive, you're proactive. You are, that's not right for me, that's not right to me, that's interesting. That one's interesting. No, those three are not for me. They're great opportunities, but just not for you. It's all well and good me saying all these opportunities coming at you, because everybody's looking at me right now like I'm a nutter, saying, what do you mean? There are no opportunities out there. Well, the second thing is you have to go out there and start creating it. I talked about casting this net wide to make sure all those opportunities that come at you get channeled in towards you. And there's a reason it's called networking. Victoria spoke very eloquently about what she learned last year about her business. What I learned is that what people really care about is interaction, and people really care about the quality of conversation with other people. It actually translates really, really well to telephone calls, to Zoom calls. I meet my clients in Hyde Park and we walk around Hyde Park. And what I'd say is get out there and network. I'm now going to murder several, sort of metaphors and whatever else. Dating, which I remember from years ago, which is pre-technology, so I don't know how it works today. But in the olden days, you had to go out and meet people, and you wouldn't turn up to the first person you met and said, "You'll do, can we get married and have kids?" Because that would terrify them. Networking is exactly the same. You don't turn up and say, "Could I have a job, please?" You say, "You seem really interesting. Can you tell me about your career to date?" And then once you've heard that, you say, "That's really interesting. I would like to do this, this, and this. What do you think?" And they go, "Well, you're either aiming way too high, or that sounds interesting. You should meet my friend Shlomi, because he's just done something similar to that. Or maybe Sandhya can help you and have a coffee with her." And you've heard them today. They're nice people. They'll probably say, I'll give you a bit of advice and I'll give you 15, 20 minutes of my time. What you do with that time determines whether they'll give you any more time after that. So, there's a Zulu proverb, which is the only way to eat an elephant is in bite-sized chunks. I'm paraphrasing, but you get my point. Don't try to fix everything with one magic silver bullet, because it doesn't exist. Get your plan, build your network, and start chipping away at it one conversation at a time. It'll take time. I tell all my clients, it'll take far longer than you think it will, but that's okay, because this is your current role. And like any job, back to the conversation about resilience, like any job, you need time off, you need weekends, you need holidays. So work out what the rhythm of your life is. Build in the exercise. And Shlomi, I'm with you. Yoga is the answer. It does wonders for your mental health and your physical well-being, no matter how humiliating it is. And that's what I'd say. Sorry, I'm rambling on, Kat. That's my advice.
Thank you, Nigel, and great Zulu proverb. Sandhya, I mean, I think one of the questions coming through, and we've seen a lot of this in the people who've approached us, is, you know, Nigel was talking a little bit about people who are between roles. And obviously we're all in the fortunate position that we have that network, we have a track record in our careers. If you're starting out in the art world, and I put this to the whole panel, you know, there are a lot of graduates out there who are facing, you know, an even more challenging moment. And the art world is not easy as a graduate to start off in any way. But do you have any thoughts and advice for the graduates? And I'll start with Sandhya, but please, anybody on the panel, chime in for those who are just at the start of their career with some words for them.
Sure. I mean, I think just to piggyback on what I said before and what Nigel said now, one of the most important things you can do is reach out to people who have the kind of career path or have had or still are in the role that you want. And again, do a little research, connect with them on LinkedIn, find out, you know, I read this article, or I saw this auction you did, or I, you know, saw an exhibition online that I thought would be interesting to you for this reason. Do you have 15 minutes to talk about your journey? And as I said before, people like to talk about themselves. So hopefully they'll give you that time, especially now that everyone's home and, you know, we're not having to rush to and fro. If they don't get back to you right away, don't be offended. It's a really busy time at the start of the year, and just be persistent in a gentle way. And I would say, especially because resources are limited in some capacity and also shifting in other capacities, if you have the ability to intern for somebody, and I know free internships is a really dirty word and it's not something that we want to promote, especially in the art world. But if somebody says, hey, I could use some help with my social media, or by the way, I need some help with my social media. If somebody wants to help, need some research on a project that they're working on, whether they can offer you compensation in terms of monetary form, or they can see that you're hard at work and make some warm introductions for you down the road, that kind of currency is probably what you need, especially if you're starting out in this environment. So don't discount free work in terms of monetary compensation, but do be clear about, you know, if I'm able to work for you, I see these people in your network, would you be able to introduce me to them once you have gotten a sense of my work ethic or my skills and the talents and abilities? That's one piece of advice.
Thank you, Sandhya. And in fact, we are going to try and run some group mentoring sessions aimed specifically at graduates, which will be publicized on the Instagram account. And we are hopefully going to sign up a one on the sort of legal side of it, one on marketing, comms and support functions. I've got a fantastic specialist who's raised her hand to do a group mentoring session about a specialist route. So we're going to try and do a little bit of that there. But if anybody else knows of any other resources on this panel for graduates, any other suggestions for the graduates out there?
I think it's important to remember that the art world is not, it's not a fortress, right? It's not a fortress with a moat that you have to cross. It is actually a very porous cloud, and there is there's no clear way in or out for that matter. And so don't think that it's just, you know, auctions, galleries, museums, and that's it. There are plenty of other businesses that overlap with the art world, and those industries, for example, interior design is booming right now. So there are many back doors to the art world within industries that are prospering and have been particularly prospering during this past year. Insurance is another industry that's been doing well, that is vital for the success of the art market. The appraisal industry, because values have changed, you know, anything that has to do with valuations, that's another backdoor to the art world. So don't restrict yourself. Don't say, you know, I've applied to all these positions that I found on NIFA and this auction house or that gallery. There are many, many, many other opportunities. And one of the great things, to Sandhya's point before, is that you do have people with molecular biology background. And I had a colleague who was a former opera singer, and another one who's a marketing executive, and another one who was a math major. And so don't think that, you know, there's just one way of entering the art world, just one channel. It is actually very, very porous. There are many ways to interact, to come into the art world in alternate means within industries that are doing very well right So look at what it is that you enjoy the most. I mean, forget about, we all love art. We're all here because we love art. Just look at the things that you enjoy the most, be it, I enjoy meeting clients. I enjoy coming up with strategy, and start thinking of industries that could use those skills. And chances are those industries have some kind of a relationship with the art world.
Thank you, Shlomi. Somebody's also put into the chat for the Zoom, thank you, Toby, that the nyfa.org is a great resource for job openings. And actually, I know that there are a couple of organizations that are starting to aggregate art world jobs. So again, maybe in our next panel, when we're going to talk about the kind of digital landscape as it relates to careers, we'll do a little bit of an assessment so we can bring that to the next panel as well, because I think it is this opacity that is a theme through the art world that can be a bit of a challenge. Another question that's come through is about resources, and the question is, what do you see, and perhaps coming to you, Victoria, first, as the sort of biggest need for talent in the art world? What skills do you think we're going to be increasingly looking for sort of the next generation coming through? So when you're hiring for Frieze, what skills have you always looked for, but what skills are you beginning to really focus on for now and the future?
I mean, in short, and this is not just Frieze, I think it's probably every gallery, every arts organization, digital. And if you are a recent graduate, you are a hell of a lot younger than I am, and you are probably far more digitally savvy than I am, because you've grown up with it and you use computers in schools. They barely had them in my school when I was a kid. It's just, you are digitally literate in a way that my generation probably won't ever really be. No offense to anyone else on the panel, who's probably streets ahead of me in this, but I think that's something like just to bear in mind. Like you probably are, if you can somehow incorporate that into, and if it's of interest, but into roles that you're looking for, there will be a need. There is already a need for that within the art world. I mean, something else to say is that people have not stopped buying art. And, I saw in the questions as well, question from an artist, from graduates, their art, and there will be opportunities in the art market, because people are still buying art. This is a passion for so many people, and it's their lives. This isn't going to go away. There are millions of people, and as well as dollars invested in it, and it will continue to be something that's incredibly important to people. Museums will continue to flourish. Galleries and artists' careers will continue to grow. And, I think as soon as we are out of lockdown as well, the one thing I think I keep hearing again and again is just how much people miss seeing art in person. And as soon as those doors open, I think it's just going to go crazy. Like, people are going to be so excited to be back, and things are just going to, not even be right back where they started. It will be a changed environment. We will have digital sitting alongside everything we do in a way that we didn't before. So back to my original point. But there are opportunities, and there will be opportunities, 100%.
I think Nigel's point, hopefully, about the roaring 20s, our own roaring 20s, and I think also the appetite for being with people again, because, and again, some of the questions coming through from our audience are around how challenging it is to network, to do those water cooler conversations. So again, I don't know if anyone on the panel knows of any sort of digital at the moment opportunities to network. Sandhya, you're hosting something through LinkedIn later.
Yes.
But again, does anyone here have any sort of advice for people who are craving that connection to talk about career paths, to meet people in a different way?
I can just pick up on that. Thank you for mentioning the summit, because I forgot to mention that earlier. But today, one of my clients, Non-Obvious Company, they are premiering, I think it's already started, our Beyond Diversity Summit. And so it's going to be 50 plus panels this week, one rolling out every hour, on topics all across all industries, across all verticals, diversity throughout society, whether it's arts, entertainment, technology, sports, medicine, journalism, whatever you want. So if you go to Beyond Diversity, Non-Obvious, beyonddiversity.com, something like that, just Google it, you'll find it. And again, tons of great speakers who are, at the top of their fields. listen to one of those panels that interests you, especially if it's a speaker that you want to connect to, and find them on LinkedIn afterwards and say, I just saw your panel on XYZ. I'd love to hear more about this. Or you mentioned a question, I have a question about something you said. You have to engage with people. They will not see you unless you reach out to them first, and you reach out to them with something meaningful, not just, hey, I like what you're doing. Can I talk to you for 15 minutes? You have to prick their interest with something that nobody else knows, or that you have demonstrated that you've taken the time to do your research about them and about what their passions and careers are. If you want to, if you demonstrate that you want to talk to them about something that they're interested in, they will definitely get back to you. I mean, that's the key, right? So I would again, thank you, Kat. I would highly recommend watching the Diversity Summit, because there's got to be something for everybody who's watching this panel to go and find someone to connect to there.
And Kat, I don't know the technology answers here, because I'm probably even more of a Luddite than Victoria. And I'm the wrong generation to speak to it. You guys out there will know. But we seem to have defaulted over the past year to it's either email or it's Zoom/Teams/Skype. And we seem to have forgotten every other means of communication. And I think people are fairly exhausted by just constant video conferences. And if you say to someone, and you do as Sandhya suggests, so listen, can I just have a phone call with you? 15 minutes on the phone. They will be relieved that they haven't got another video conference. That actually they can go and walk their dog or go and get a pint of milk whilst talking to someone on the phone. And look, I don't know what the other channels are out there to get to people, but just don't default to what has become the standard of video conferences, because I'm an introvert, and even I miss people extraordinarily. When we came out of lockdown 1, I found it immensely overwhelming. I sort of would go and have a doorstep drink on a Sunday evening and then come home and cry myself to sleep and have the best night's sleep I'd had for a long time. But actually, that's what we're missing. This gets somewhere close to that, but it doesn't have to be everything like this. Mix it up and shake it around a bit.
Thank you, Nigel. We'll roll on the spring. Listen, I'm conscious of time, and we want to keep to the hour. I just have to take issue. I obviously think Victoria is a technological wizard. She managed to transform her business in a couple of weeks online. But I know what you mean, and I think many people have said to me, and a great person watching today, I think last week, told me about just the importance of picking up the phone. Real voice, and people can make time, and just that connectivity. I'm conscious we haven't got to a couple of questions. There was one around some of the financial challenges of setting up a business. And again, whoever asked that question, I'm sure we can, if you want to talk a little bit more about some of the challenges, or Shlomi, maybe as our final question, you could just very briefly tell us what your advice would be to people who, are trying to find a job, are trying to set something up, but just, financially are finding it tough at this time.
Of course. So the first time I got laid off in 2009, I decided to basically monetize every skill I had, even those that were not related at all to what I was doing for a living. So I began advising the Israeli consulate, wanted to do a float for Pride, for Chicago Pride. So all of a sudden I became an expert on events. I began to write. I was helping friends edit their papers, and I would charge them for that. Another friend was, she went traveling for 2 weeks. So I was bunny sitting her rabbits, and that paid. So, no skill goes unturned in times of need, and you're probably able to monetize a lot more than you realize. Sandhya just mentioned that she could really use the help with social media. There are plenty of people watching right now. We're like, social media, that's easy. I do it all the time. You can't take those skills for granted. Everything can be monetized right now. And Sandhya, I'm with you completely. You're in good company. Or to Victoria's point, this is a generation, all of you watching, you're all digital natives. You're all digital natives. That is worth its weight in gold for employers right now. So don't be afraid to reach out to someone and say, I'm great with social media. I'm great with blogging. I'm a good writer. Can I just show you a couple of samples? Chances are that people, us dinosaurs, will be very receptive to hearing from you. It is tough. It is tough. You do have to get creative with how you spend your money. Forming a business, I will say this, is not as expensive as you might think, in the sense that if you live in New York, go to ny.gov. The Department of State in New York does a wonderful job walking you through the steps. The fees are not exorbitant. It's manageable, and it's certainly worth it, legitimizing yourself as a business.
Shlomi, I think that's fantastic advice. Thank you so much. And in fact, our next panel discussion will be around sort of digital development in your career. So hopefully we'll pick up on some of these themes next time. And in fact, on our mentoring scheme, we have some reverse mentors. So we have deliberately matched a younger generation of mentors to actually an older generation of people transitioning in their careers to help them navigate some of the platforms that just weren't in existence perhaps when they changed jobs before. So I think, thinking differently at this time is really important, being brave, being courageous, and asking for help. It is not weakness to ask for help. It's not weakness to know what you don't know. And therefore, I think, that would be my message about just being brave and not letting the worm inside one's brain get the better of you. So I want to thank all the panelists today. It's been lovely for me sitting in lockdown London, haven't been out much, to spend time with you guys. This whole talk will be available on the Artnet YouTube channel. So if you have people who perhaps wanted to see it, or you want to recommend it, send it out on your own social media channels to the audience here. And the next discussion will take place on Wednesday, the 24th of February. We really look forward to seeing you all there. And again, Sandhya, Nigel, Vicky, Shlomi, thank you so much. Great to spend time with you. And I'm off to go and eat humble pie about yoga. Lots of love to you all. Thank you, everybody. And thank you to the Artnet team for giving us this space.